There are dozens of us, Stewart. Dozens, I'm telling you.
At least dozens.
Yeah.
10 billion people, and there's dozens of us out there that love
That's right.
Battlestar Galactica.
Right. That's what makes a geek a geek. You're not in the majority.
That's right. We have our little subsect. All right, we'll start it over again. Take 3. This is our first time ever for 3 takes. Welcome to Precon Geeks, your home for all things pre-construction. I'm your host, John Reich, and this week we are joined by 2 guests. We have Stewart Carroll, our Chief Customer Officer from Beck Tech. How are you doing, Stewart?
Doing great, John. Thanks for having me back. I thought I messed up last time and you wouldn't invite me.
Oh, we'll always have you on anytime you want to come on, Stewart. You're always welcome.
Love it.
And
Love
we also have Grant
Hall pass.
Stucker
That's
here.
a hall pass right there.
Yeah.
You can say whatever you want, Stewart. You're going to come back.
As long as you have the British accent, it always sounds refined and elegant. So there you go.
There you go.
And then you obviously have already heard him, his Grant Stucker. He's a reformed estimator, and now he is a strategic account executive here with Beck Tech. How are you doing, Grant?
Fantastic, man. Living the dream. Thanks for having me on again.
And as much as I would love to just talk sports with another former swimmer and a former football player, we're not going to talk about sports. We're going to nerd it out today a little bit. And in honor of the recent release that my kids and I have been watching of Battlestar Galactica on Amazon, we decided that we would talk about AI, since that was kind of forefront and center for my family, at least this past weekend when we were watching that. So AI obviously has a lot of connotations in our life in general and in our industry specifically. So kind of what's your guys' outlook on the use of AI in Precon, and what do you think is going to, the direction that we're going to be going to right now?
Yeah, great question. Sorry, Stuart, I might just say one thing here real quick.
No, jump in.
It feels so. We recently came back from advancing pre-construction last week, right? And I've been there for the last few years, kind of comparing this year with the year before. And this year, there was a heavy topic of AI, not only from just the vendor space itself and people that are using it from a tech side, but also the industry influencers, practitioners that are speaking on these topics. A lot of topics and a lot of questions came around AI. So people want to know what it is, number one, and how can it help me, number two. So yeah, I'm sure that we're going to get into a lot of just those answers, but yeah, Stuart, what would your kind of intro to AI be?
Kind of the same thing. I mean, it's very rare that we have a conversation with a customer or somebody that's looking at our technology where the question of what kind of AI do you have in the platform doesn't come up, which is not the case, even maybe 12 or 18 months ago. It was those on sort of the leading edge that were asking those questions, but not the masses. So I think it's gone from the leading edge to everybody is either intrigued, scared, excited, and every emotion sort of in between. So, but it is exciting, I think, that the industry is at large asking questions about.
Yeah, it's forcing a conversation of just technology in general. It's even when I started over a year ago, into last year, even though ChatGPT was it had come onto the scene. Part of my questions was hey, are you guys using anything in artificial intelligence, as I'm talking to different GCs and contractors from across the country? And some of them were no, we don't. What is that? That was not even a year ago. And now it's I'm being asked the questions, to Stuart's point, hey, how are you guys adopting AI into your platform? And with that comes a whole lot of discussion about technology and data and all this and that. So it's definitely come onto the scene pretty strongly.
I also think, to your point around it brings up a conversation around, technology and change and process and data. I think that stuff is important. Our industry has historically lagged, and I would contend that pre-construction has perhaps been, one of the 1 or 2 laggers of the laggards. I don't mean that in a bad way per se. It's just that, the old slide rule and an Excel workbook have sort of like served the industry well. And I think what comes along with those conversations is really a whole plethora of challenges that old methodology and old mindset carries. We're all aware that our industry is short of people. Everybody is looking for, seasoned, experienced people, and they don't exist. And those that do exist are quickly approaching retirement age in their masses. And I think when people leave our industry, it becomes even more challenging to get the work done that we historically done, yet let alone the increasing volume of construction that needs to be planned and executed. So I think it's really healthy that our industry is starting to look at these things more holistically, and it touches so many elements of the built environment. I just think it's exciting, and I think our industry is well overdue at taking a step back and asking these questions about how do we work smarter and, not necessarily harder, because no matter how hard we work in the future, we probably can't keep up with the volume of projects and activities and requests and requirements that are being imposed on the teams that are out there today. So I think it's amazing. I think it's awesome we're having those conversations.
Yeah. I agree, Stewart. Go ahead, John. I had to follow up to that, but go ahead. I want you to step in.
After you, Grant. I'm just here to listen to you guys.
No, I think that just brings up like an interesting topic of this idea that technology and AI is going to replace people, right? And and I hear that objection often from those that choose not to educate themselves on what is AI, what does it do, how can it help me, and all that stuff. Everybody kind of immediately turns their gaze to the Terminator, and robots and artificial intelligence taking over the world, right? Which
Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, Battlestar Galactica, exactly right. So they have this preconceived notion about what AI is, and it's just like if we feed into it, the machine is going to grow and it's going to take over the world. Right now, that's definitely not the case. And you talk to any of these groups, like some of our partners, Toggle AI, what is it that you guys are solving for, and how are people adopting it, and how are people receiving it? The use case is so much more drastically different than we're replacing people. It is much more we are enhancing the experience of Precon so that you can really dedicate more of your time and making it more valuable to your clients, to your communities, to your business, right? You're further but you're further reducing clerical and administrative things that people don't enjoy doing, right? Data entry, right. Connecting of this and that. So there is this is, even though we are a tech group, we are forward thinking in AI, adopting AI, we see there's no replacement of the human brain that is happening. There is this is always going to be a people business. It's really just trying to utilize advanced technology to be able to enhance the experience of the estimator and the Precon group, right?
It's interesting to me if you take a big step back and you look at sort of historically major innovations. You pick any, but like the car. Well, there was a whole economy and a whole group of people whose jobs before the car were around horses. People to put new shoes on horses, and people to stable the horses, and people to feed the horses. Well, when the car came along, people's roles didn't go away. They just changed. They went back to school. They learned how to, be a mechanic on a car, or how to, back in the day, pump gas into the car. But I think every major innovation, this fear that I'm irrelevant and my job is going to go away, and I'm going to be replaced, comes up. And I think every innovation to this point in our human history, it's not that people have gone away, it's that they have done different things in different ways. And in many ways, it becomes a better job than what you had before. I mean, going from working in, with animal animals and what comes along with animals, both in and out. I'll leave it at that. It wasn't clean. It wasn't
We
healthy.
know where you're
And
going,
now all of a
Stuart.
sudden,
It's okay.
yeah, now all of a sudden you go to mechanics, and it's a better quality of life. I think AI is just another innovation, another tool that if you learn how to use it, you learn what it can do and what it can't do. I think you can become more valuable, and I think you can do more with the limited amount of time that you do have. So I think it's just like any other innovation that mankind has ever had.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always find kind of funny about these, and specifically around the pushback against it, is like, oh well, I don't want to do this because my job is to count the widgets on the page and do whatever. Well, just about everyone that you look at, that even if they're an Excel estimator, they do all their estimating in Excel. I can almost guarantee they have some kind of macro-laden workbook with all these formulas pre-populated. Well, that is basically a very rudimentary AI. I mean, it is essentially doing the steps for you that you don't have to replicate those steps yourself. So you build a macro to, I'm going to find all these values and I'm going to consolidate them into one, or every time I type something here, it's going to move it into another cell. Well, if you didn't have to write the macro to do that, I mean, would that make your job easier? It probably would, because you don't have to write the code. It automatically does that, and it knows to do that without you even telling it. That's really all the AI is trying to do, is just take the steps that you're already doing and just make them even easier for you to do them, so that then you can spend your time doing what you should be doing, which is evaluating the end result. And I think too many times estimators get caught up in no, I need to itemize every widget. I need to count all the detail. I'm down in the detail so far. By the time I'm at the point where I can take a holistic look at the job and evaluate where the job is as a whole, I've got 5 minutes because I'm turning my number in.
Right.
And that's too late. You need to be evaluating the job holistically from the start. And if you can find anything, whether it's an estimating platform that does things a little bit faster, or an AI platform that automates that takeoff process, or automates the building of the estimate in some way, and then you can spend more time on the holistic job. I think that's just value added to each individual person and to each company.
Right.
It's also along that same line. I mean, people don't get into construction or pre-construction specifically to count and measure. They get in to solve problems. So if you are able to take a big step back, it enables you to spend more of your time solving the things that you really got into the industry in the first place.
Right.
It really is a way of doing what you're passionate about.
I mean, I look back at my own experience of becoming an estimator and where I was when that came about. Sorry, hang on one sec.
Yeah, so I'm gonna piggyback off what Grant started, but essentially the reason I moved into Precon was, I like you said, I like to solve problems, and I wanted to continue solving them. And if you get on a project, and I was out in the field to start, and then I'm solving problems for that one project for 2 years. Well, in Precon, I'm solving a new project in large scale every 2 weeks. And so every 2 weeks, that was the reason I got into it. It was just, I was able to make big impacts on a project at a large level every time I went in the office. And it was like, okay, this project's going to go forward now because I found this cost savings, or I found this problem. We're going to solve it before it even gets out in the field. So being able to do that, again, looking at it as a holistic project rather than micromanaging the individual pieces, or, hey, have these rebar cages been tied properly? That's important, but it's also not what I wanted to do. So this, to me, having this kind of AI revolution and things moving in where I can, again, be solving big problems for clients, just seems to me like it's setting people up to be much more successful and really be able to get a lot more volume done.
Yeah, 100%. And so where I was, sorry for the interruption there.
No problem.
Like, I look back at my own experience. Like, I started in the field as a project engineer. I went into being a project manager, And for various reasons at the time, like I went to do a rotation in Precon with the understanding that I was gonna go back out in the field and run work. But what I found in Precon that I really liked was just like this problem solving, being a part of the design, creating a relationship with owners and design teams, and like being a part of that whole creation of the project was what spoke to me and what I've started to become passionate about. I definitely didn't get into it because I was really enjoyed counting doors and hardware and all those things that like like you don't get into it because like takeoff speaks to you. You get into it because the connection with your ownership happens, your connection with your design team happens, you feel like you affected change in a positive way, and you like were able to drive that decision process. So and then you run into the same kind of objection where the reason why we have some of these methodical things like takeoff is so it teaches us things about the job. Like we have a methodical way to understand the job better by counting every single thing. And it's like, okay, well, I think it's more of a like that's what we have to do in its current state. But if that did not have to happen, we would still come up with some way to learn the job.
Yeah,
like you're not just going to
change.
discount like AI is going to take it and like we're going to trust it. Like that's just never going to happen. So it kind of fast tracks that. How else can I learn the job in a quicker way than to spend all this time doing takeoff, for example? And this is the one option that I'm using to learn the job in a different way. So
on that note,
go on,
sorry,
Joe.
I want to. So on that note about the 2D learning the job, so I think this is kind of important on the we had this kind of takeoff revolution that was supposed to be occurring 10 years ago about BIM and using the 3D model. And the thought process back then was, hey, we're going to bring these 3D models in and it's just going to tell us the quantities, which in theory is absolutely fantastic. In practice, we've obviously seen it doesn't work in the way that we all hoped it would. How do you guys see this being different as an adoption of AI being a different kind of path than the kind of using the BIM 3D models to generate your takeoff and generate your quantities?
I think there's a couple things. I think the example of 2D takeoff to start with, and we can circle back on this, I think is one good example of what I would call AI for automation. So activities that don't really add a ton of additional value to the project that's sort of necessary in order to get the project done. So I think there's other kinds of AI, but specifically to your question, I think there are parallels. And I think unfortunately with BIM, it was painted as, silver bullet, push a button, extract the quantities and you're done. I think the reality is, if you think about 2D takeoff, there's at least two parts to it, maybe three. There's the act of sketching, there's the reviewing what was sketched, and then probably most important, what's not in the drawings that needs to get accounted for. And right. I think in the 2D example of automation or AI, I think it doesn't eliminate the two most important. It eliminates the part that is labor intensive. But doesn't really necessarily add any value. So I think as long as we don't lose sight where we started this conversation, the big picture, takeoff is there so that we understand the job, we quantify the job, but most importantly, we verify everything that hits the estimate. I think it's going to be different. I think if people treat 2D AI as a silver bullet, and I trust everything that's been sketched by the AI, I think we run the risk of it being just like BIM and having all sorts of barriers to adoption. But I still think BIM is a wonderful thing. I just don't think it should ever have been pitched as a silver bullet that, hey, extract the quantities and you're done. And yeah. I think, if we had a do-over, I think we would probably learn from what we've done this go around and do BIM the same way I hope AI is going to be done. It's just a quick way of getting to what is there, not necessarily that it's the right quantity or captures things that aren't necessarily in the BIM.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, most jobs, at least a lot of the jobs that I was on, you're not contracted to the BIM model, right? So like the BIM model is a architectural and like engineering design team tool to be able to put together the design of the project, right? That's where it had originated, and now like all these quantities are there, so you'd think that you should be able to gather that and digest that. That's still very possible. It depends on which design team you're working with, how much they put into certain level of development in that BIM model, how much are they understanding of what you're going to be doing with that BIM model to take into quantity. So that's a whole thing, and there's people that use that successfully. And have an intermediary of like, hey, this is what we get from the architect. We're going to change it up a little bit to make sure it's what we can use, and then we put it into the system, and we're extracting models. Still very doable, but at the end of the day, still not contracted to the BIM model.
Right.
Mostly everybody's contracted to the contract documents of 2D drawings that the architect's providing. And so when you think about how some of these AI tools are quantifying the 2D drawings, still to Stewart's point, you're not going to take that with as gospel and just like not review it and just put this trust factor in there. There still is a audit like capability to say, okay, now that I see this on a 2D plan, now we can alter a couple of things if it's not quite 100% what I'm looking for. And so I think that there's significant time savings that you can gain by just having AI do the takeoff, but then you still have to insert yourself and utilize an estimator mindset to be able to put quantities to cost in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, for me, and I'm going to answer my own question here, I guess, but to me, I think the big difference, and so you talked about this is an automation AI that we're referring to in this case. We're automating a process that everyone already is using, and we're just trying to make that more efficient. We're not, to me, the BIM tie-in was we're changing the process, which is a very different proposition, and that's a lot more uncomfortable to go into. You ask any, estimator that's been doing it for longer than a few years, and you give them a set of takeoff, they don't know whether it's from an AI or a college intern or whoever. They can review that takeoff and check it and make sure that it's right pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And you can do the same process with an AI. You can automate it. It gives you the same kind of outputs that you're used to seeing. You can then go in and check those. But kind of as my last question to you guys before we wrap it up today, Stewart, you already talked about this being an automation AI. I'm assuming you are big on the generative AI aspect of how that could affect pre-con and design and everything in construction as a whole. Am I going down the right path with that?
I could go directionally, yes, but I'll give you a subtle difference. I think there is this idea of generative AI that is scary both to people in our industry and also I think is going to take time to perfect. And I think we run the risk of generative AI going the same way as BIM. The results don't line up with people's expectations. And as a result, if we go too fast in that direction, I think it can cause more harm than good. I think there is a third, which I think is probably the next layer, which I'm going to call suggestive AI, where it doesn't force here's a new estimate with a whole bunch of things automatically applied, unit prices, construction systems based on your history. I think that's scary as all get up. I do think the idea of presenting ranges of unit prices, presenting optionality for VE options based on history, providing the estimator with historical gaps in, say, subcontractors' bids. I think those kinds of things, when they're presented as a suggestion, you can take them or not, I think is probably the next leap. And I get excited by that because for an office project, not that there's many around, but pick your building topology. How many freaking VE options are there? It's not an infinite list. So let the computer make some suggestions based on what it's seen you do in the past. But if you want to go in a completely different direction, that should be possible. You shouldn't be forced just because that's what we've historically done. That's what we do in the future. So to me, that's the next big leap. And eventually, I think we'll get to generative, but I don't think that's in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, I think
at least to be mainstream.
A huge caveat to that too is, in order to have something suggestive, what you're teaching your AI is very, very paramount to be, accurate, standardized data, where you're not like, and I kind of take a big step back. I went to a AI and construction summit a couple of months ago and listened to a bunch of different speakers in their respective field, both pre-con and construction, to talk about where AI is headed.
How much went right over your head in that?
It was a good amount, but there was a couple of things that I was like, there's also talking to, practitioners in the industry. So it's not like it's this, like, here's like the coding side of everything. It's like, here's how to boil it down. One of the best definitions that I had heard about AI was like, right now it's kind of like an intern.
Yeah.
And like, if you have 20 different interns that you're bringing in for the summer, what are you going to do with those interns? Do you have an intern program that says like, hey, here's your point of contact, here's what they're going to be teaching you, they're going to be teaching you how to do it one time, and then the expectation is you learn how to do this, and then you can duplicate that and take over that role. Well, if you have AI that is being taught 6 different things, 6 different ways, 6 different languages, essentially, like, they don't really concisely put together a responsibility to say, this is the right way to do it, this is how I'm supposed to be doing it, this is how I can help you, because the data is so polluted.
Right.
So like, the first step is making sure your data is somewhat in a place of like reliable data, garbage in, garbage out, right? So if we're teaching an intern or a herd of interns how to do something and take over a task, we need to make sure it's concise and accurate language for the AI to learn off of. Then we can give them a little bit of a promotion and say, okay, now you can do this since you've learned how to do that, and give us some suggestions on our own history of data that is now mostly accurate, right? So that's where I'm seeing a lot of like the future of AI. I agree with Stewart, but also is heavily reliant on those that have been focusing on clean data over the last 5 or 6 years. There's a kind of an old saying, the best time to have planted a tree was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
The next best time is today. The same thing in the world of AI and data. The best time to have been cleansing your database and teaching this AI is 5 years ago. The next best time is today. So it's like, there's going to be those that are reacting to AI in a way that's like, hey, we've been doing these things, now we can just like teach it what we need to teach it, and we're going to be making huge leaps in the pre-con space. But then there's also going to be those that have resisted it, that have not paid attention to it, that don't care about their history of data, that they're going to be much more reactionary in the space. And unfortunately, I think that's going to be a harder hill to climb.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That people that are getting on board with it right now, and again, with the caveats of it's a technology that it's in its infancy, basically, maybe toddler level, but it's really young, and we're still kind of working through all the kinks. And as we continue progressing, as long as we're cautious in terms of how we use it, and accept the fact that there are going to be some wrong answers occasionally, and then eventually teach it how to make those right answers. Like you said, it's taking a college intern, and that first summer they don't know anything, and the end of the first summer you hope that they know something, and then you hope they come back and learn a little more next time. So I really think that's where it is, and I know, Stewart, you're not as bullish on the generative AI piece of it as I might be, but I really am looking forward to that happening, hopefully before I retire. We'll see.
You're younger than me, so and don't get me wrong, I want it to happen. I just
Yeah.
think you run the risk that the barrier is change management and trust.
Yeah.
And I think if we don't do it right, you run the risk of missing the opportunity by spooking people.
Yeah.
I think we will get there. I just think it needs to be managed, which I'm sure it will be.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for coming on today and talking about this topic with me. AI is always cool to chat about, and you guys are welcome to come on and talk about anything you want anytime.
I love
Thanks
it.
for having
Thanks
us,
for having us, John.
And for any listeners, feel free to email us at precongeek@beck-technology.com if you would like to come on the podcast and talk to me about anything, or just send us a topic you want us to talk about. We'd be more than happy to do so. Always also go to our website, www.beck-technology.com. Suzanne's always posting really good blog posts there, and you can also visit our community and talk to other estimators and pre-con professionals about what's going on in the industry. As always, thank you for listening, and we will catch you guys on the next one.